And that's all of that music you're getting. Ranma 1 half is a pretty big franchise for the PC Engine, thanks mainly to a coincidence of timing. The platform was effectively the only game in town for multimedia gaming at the exact moment that Ranma 1 half was the biggest cartoon on television in Japan. So Ranma 1 half is a yearly franchise on the system, with 3 separate games, and all 3 games are radically different from each other. The later 2 have subtitles, but this one's just called Ranma 1 half. If you're watching this video and don't know what Ranma 1 half is, I am personally very shocked. Still, just in case I need it, Ranma 1 half is the brainchild of Rumiko Takahashi, a creator whose works have already been transformed into a few other PC Engine games we've seen. The concept behind Ranma 1 half is that Ranma is the heir to the Anything Goes school of martial arts. His completely terrible father took him along on a training mission to China, where they both fell into some of the hundreds of cursed springs that dot the landscape. Ranma's curse is that when he's splashed with cold water, he transforms into the shape of a young woman, and getting splashed with hot water changes him back. Upon returning to Japan, Ranma and his father wind up living at the Tendo Dojo, and that's because Ranma's terrible father had a bad habit of setting up arranged marriages anytime he needed to trade for something. And then things spiral from there as more rivals, fiancés, and fiancé rivals show up, half of them under a similar curse as Ranma, only turning into various animals. Ranma 1 half is one of the flashpoints for the harem show, a romantic comedy where you've got one main guy and then a bunch of women who are all pursuing him. Ranma 1 half started as a comic, but this game is very obviously and strongly based on the animated adaptation. The show had been airing for about 18 months when this game was released, and it pulls its story from bits and pieces of roughly the first 30 episodes, before it swerves off to conclude with its own story. That adaptation is the big selling point of Ranma 1 half the game, as any fan will keep going, "Oh, I know this bit." Unfortunately, this game came out just before the obvious genre for a Ranma 1 half game really hit it big. So this winds up being an action platformer with some weirdly elaborate boss fights, rather than a straightforward fighting game. Don't worry, we'll get to one of those eventually. The control scheme here is a bit elaborate. Button 1 jumps and button 2 attacks, but there's many kinds of attacks, and actually 2 different ways of jumping. If you push up and button 1, then Ranma will do a somersault, and you can do that even when you're in the air. You need that move to get over some pits, reach certain platforms, avoid a lot of attacks, and perform certain attacks of your own. The feel for it's a little bit more complicated than it seems, because usually you're trying to jump in a direction, and letting go of that direction to press up and jump again can result in you losing some of that momentum. As for your attacks, well, besides the medium punch, the low kick, the jump kick, there's a downward kick that hurts enemies as you land on them, and if you time an aerial attack just right, Ranma will leave a rainbow trail behind him that indicates that you're doing some extra damage. Generally speaking, there's 2 kinds of stages. Side-scrolling, where your goal is to just get to the end, and combat, where you have to defeat all of the enemies. Often it'll just be one enemy, but there's a few times where there's a whole crowd you have to beat up. There's a very small number of power-ups that you can collect. A bandage that will restore a little bit of Ranma's health, a picture of Ranma's face that will give you an extra life, and maybe the most useful item, the panda head. The curse that Ranma's father is under turns him into a panda, and collecting those panda icons will let you summon him by pressing the select button. The panda will move in, pick up Ranma, run off, and then come back in, and this will damage enemies that he runs through. The real reason to do this is that it will change Ranma back and forth between forms. Some stages have water, and getting splashed will change Ranma. If Ranma's in his male form, then he hits harder. And if Ranma looks like a woman, then he moves faster and jumps higher. And all of this finally brings me to the big problem with Ranma 1 half. The game Ranma 1/2, not the media property. The game has terrible controls and terrible combat. Something I didn't mention when describing how to play was just how floaty everything is. It makes Ranma feel stiff and unresponsive. And as for the combat, well, it feels like the invincibility period after Ranma gets hit is very small, because your health bar just melts away. Ranma might be able to take 5 or 6 hits from a major character before losing a life. And as male Ranma, when you punch them, you do about 1/3 of a heart of damage. It becomes a situation where you need to do 30 hits or more to defeat an enemy, and they only have to connect with their attacks a handful of times. It is also one of those games where the only part of your attack that does damage is the actual tip of Ranma's foot or his fist, and so it's possible to wind up inside your opponent, unable to affect them. Now the good news is that the rapid damaging can actually work in your favor. Not if you're doing standard jump kicks or if you're punching. Those seem to only check for damage once. But the stomp move can sometimes do multiple hits on the way down. It winds up being the most vital move in your arsenal. On the other hand, sometimes you just have to look for the gaps and attack during them. And given the length of those health bars, that can be a very slow process. If you lose a life, you'll pick up right where you left off, though any characters you are fighting get their health back. And if you get a game over, then you're prompted to continue by pressing button 1, but you have about a 2-second window in which to do that. So if you, for example, let go of the controller because your hand was getting tired, then you probably missed the window to continue. You do get a password that will let you pick up where you left off, but the password appears very, very, very slowly. It takes about 20 seconds before it all cycles to a stop. If for some bizarre reason you did like the fighting aspects of the game, then there is a 2-player mode. You can't select your characters in it, you just both have to play as the same character. As for the stages, well, first Ranma's running through China to get to the training location, and then you have a one-on-one battle with Ranma's father until you knock him out and into one of the springs. That gets you to Japan, where the next stage is running to school, and you have to knock all of the students out of the way. You're controlling both Ranma and his fiancée Akane at the same time on this level, and you never stop running to the right. Reach the end of that stage, and then you're thrown into a boss fight against Kuno in the middle of a thunderstorm. Once you finish that, then it's another boss fight against Ryoga, and he's a real nightmare since his initial attacks charge ahead the entire length of the screen and can't be jumped over unless you perfectly time a somersault. After that, there's a flashback to when Ranma encountered a village of Amazon women in China, and after you beat all of them, there's a boss fight against Shampoo. And that's as far as I got while I was playing. This is a brutally unfair game. That's about the halfway point through it, and after that there's a few stages where Ranma competes to deliver ramen. A very large martial artist shows up to fight. Ranma and his father go on a training mission to the mountains. And then it wraps up with Ranma beating up the staff in a Journey to the West themed Chinese restaurant. This PC Engine Ranma 1/2 seems to be well liked in Japan, though more for the license than the gameplay. Almost all of the praise I saw for it was for the cutscenes. My feeling here is that this is not a fun game to play. It's just too clumsy. In many ways, it feels like they rushed to get it out on the shelves before the end of the year. I really think the only way you could enjoy this one is if you're already a huge fan of the show, and even if you're not, you still might wind up frustrated.